It has been described as a shot in the foot by so many people, politicians and company directors, with Brexit plummeting the UK into turmoil on both financial and social level, the economy already sinking to lows before the arrival of the COVID-19 virus and likely to continue to suffer for the foreseeable future. After 8 rounds of talks, the UK has failed to persuade the EU to sign a trade deal, with a stronger-handed EU outright rejecting Britain's demands for conditions surrounding various issues, as Britain begs the EU for a Canada-style trade deal, but the EU appears to be standing firm, much to the frustration of the British government and Boris Johnson.
Absurd and self-defeating as that action would be, even as we debate this matter, Mr. Speaker, the EU has not taken that particular revolver off the table. And I hope that they will do so, and that we can reach a Canada-style free trade agreement as well. Indeed, it is such an extraordinary threat, and it seems so incredible that the EU could do this, that we are not taking powers in this bill to neutralise that threat, but obviously reserve the right to do so if these threats persist.
However, the European Union sees the whole situation in a different light, with many EU nations seeing Britain as a laughingstock of the continent, as the stronger together notion enjoyed by the EU gives the negotiating team the upper hand over the British and sees the EU chief negotiator, Michel Barnier, standing firm in support of EU solidarity.
To be clear, we will not sacrifice, never sacrifice, the EU's long-term economic and political interests for the sole benefit of the UK.
Hello and welcome to Economic Divide with me, Kaveh Tafway. In this week's episode, we will be examining the latest developments surrounding Brexit, of which one academic describing the situation as the saga that keeps on giving. But what exactly are the British trying to do? And are they heading for economic catastrophe? Should they fail to strike a deal with the EU? Well, don't forget to join the conversation with us by visiting our Twitter feed using the marker @ED_program. We would love to hear about how Brexit has affected you. Are you in favor of remaining in the EU, or do you think Brexit will bring new opportunities for Britain? Write in, let us know, and join the debate. Well, what are the financial implications of Brexit for Britain? One estimate of the costs alone suggests a figure in the region of £130 billion. This figure exceeds the amount that Britain has paid the EU over the 47 years, raising the question as to how and where Britain believes that they will save money should they leave the EU. Furthermore, it appears that the Brexit dream was sold as a lie by the orchestrators of the referendum, with the likes of Boris Johnson, Michael Gove, and the shadowy figure of Dominic Cummings fooling the British into believing that the UK would save £350 million per week by leaving the EU and injecting this cash into the NHS, something that to date has failed to happen as the NHS crumbles. But according to the fullfact.org website, the true value of the UK leaving the EU could see the initial cost of Brexit cost the UK around £200 billion. That's right, £200 billion. And on top of this, another £39 billion owed to the EU as part of the so-called divorce bill, hence further raising the question as to how Britain will ever be able to deliver on the promises of the money saved by leaving the EU, trickling down to the benefit of the people of Britain.
As the fireworks rattled echoes of jubilant celebration above the streets of Britain on that fateful day in 2016, when the people voted to leave the EU, nobody would have realised that just 4 years later, and with no deal in sight with the European Union, that Britain would be on the verge of bankruptcy. Not only did the impact of Brexit have a detrimental effect on the British economy, supply chain and social demeanour, but the UK was also slammed with one of the heaviest impacts of the COVID-19 virus, which saw a lockdown earlier in the year, as well as being on the verge of a second lockdown at the time of writing this very piece. According to some analysts, the financial implications of Brexit were due to be in the region of around £30 to £40 billion. However, new figures place the true impact in the hundreds of billions. At the start of the year, right here on Economic Divide, we covered the story of the failing British retail trade. Considering this was prior to the full impact of the virus, things were already looking very bleak for many British retail names. With the added misery of the coronavirus hitting the UK market, things have taken a turn for the worse, as even more British chains have felt the impact of the crumbling economy, with the likes of Debenhams, the House of Fraser and John Lewis all closing stores and releasing staff, as well as a host of other small independent stores, restaurants and other leisure venues. So predictable was the outcome as to the fallout of Brexit that 4 previous Prime Ministers have stood in front of audiences and condemned the plan to leave the EU, with David Cameron resigning upon the referendum result, Lord Major warning that the current government must not play with fire over the north of Ireland, and Tony Blair, for all his faults in the past, outright saying that Brexit was a mistake.
But leaving the European Union is about the worst thing we could do to prepare ourselves for that future properly, and that's why, in my view, we really should remain. Thank you.
The EU is a major supplier of food to Britain, but what will the consequences be to the food supply chain? Should Britain strike a deal with the EU, or should they fail to agree terms with the Europeans? According to the British medical journals, 10 specialists with expertise in food, procurement, retail, agriculture and food security have painted a bleak picture for the British. When combined in proportion to the consumer price index, the median food price change for Britain, should they secure a deal, will see prices increase by roughly 6.1% to 17% for around 90% of imported goods. However, the situation looks dire should the UK fail to secure a deal, with figures suggesting that 90% of EU imports to Britain will see a price augmentation of 22.5% to 52%, leaving the British consumer very much out of pocket and the supermarkets with fewer stocks and empty shelves. So how does this affect the individual? Well, prior to the EU-UK negotiations being started back in the year 2017, 13% of the people in Britain stated that they were worried about food running out in a post-Brexit era, with 8% of people stating that they couldn't afford meals and they went hungry. Current figures now show that this has risen actually to 29% in low-income households, showing that Brexit is going to hit hardest at the lower end of the class scale.
One of the key sticking points of the ongoing stalemate in the Brexit negotiations between the UK and the EU is the issue surrounding the north of Ireland. With the British desperate for a trade deal with the US, as the possibility of one with the EU seems to be becoming ever slimmer, the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, has stepped in and brought up the issue of the Good Friday Agreement, of which then US President Bill Clinton played a pivotal role. Add to the equation that the US has a huge Irish-American population who are also involved in various projects within Ireland, and Pelosi appears to be within reason by stating that should the UK breach the conditions that lead to undermining peace in Ireland, then a deal with the UK would be very much off the table.
Well, the US takes its role as a guarantor of the Good Friday peace agreement very seriously, and this isn't just the Democrats either. I mean, key House Republicans also. If you think of Paul Ryan, for example, clues in the surname. So therefore, any moves by the UK government that could undermine the Good Friday Agreement and lead to a hard border in Northern Ireland would be looked upon very severely.
The issue appears to be so serious that Boris Johnson's hastily dispatched his Foreign Minister Dominic Raab to the US to try to convince the US government that the potential bending of the rules from the EU divorce bill or the withdrawal agreement would not breach the peace and stability on the island of Ireland. However, the reality of the trip was more of a plea for a trade deal with the US, as deep down, the UK know that they've lost to the EU when it comes to securing one with them.
So the trip, of course, has quite a lot of significance in terms of trying to reassure Washington as regards to the UK's intentions over Ireland. But in terms of the prospects of a US trade deal, we're not going to see one of those ratified before the end of the year. It'll have to make its way through Congress as well, get the required 2/3 majority in the Senate, as well as passing through the House of Representatives.
Any notion of a deal with the US could see the UK lose out on many issues, with the likes of agricultural business in dispute, and more importantly, the so-called darling of the British, namely the NHS, which, as we know, the US has eyes for, as they target the notion of flooding the UK with US-made drugs, much to the profit of American companies and to the loss of the UK.
Joining me in the studio is Professor Amelia Hatfield, head of the Department of Politics and director of the Center for Britain and Europe at the University of Surrey. Now, she's a long-standing Jean Monnet Chair in European Foreign Affairs and teaches and consults on EU foreign policy. Amelia has published numerous pieces, including The Future of EU Development Policy Post-2020 and Brexit, a regional rebalance versus Westminster power grab. Professor Hatfield, many thanks for being with us today here on Economic Divide.
Lovely to be here on the show. Thank you for having me.
Okay, my first question relates to the ongoing Brexit negotiations. It seems that the UK is no longer closer to sealing a deal with the EU, and it's even trying to bend international law to suit themselves. What message do you think this sends to the EU and to the rest of the world that Britain is a viable negotiating and trading partner?
That's a good question, and quite a tough one as well. I think we are getting close to a deal. It may not seem so, possibly from the outside. The 15th of October is the key date. Obviously, that's the deadline that Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister, has set on the one side, and Barnier, the Commission negotiator, on the other. Because of course that's very close to the next big EU Council session, and it's really the EU Council that has to sign off that deal. But between now and then, we've got quite a long way to go. I think it has not helped the situation with regards to Britain's ability to negotiate in good faith. With the recent declaration last week that it was prepared to amend aspects, provisions, if you like, of the withdrawal agreement that it had signed last year with the European Union. The reason it wants to do this is to give itself something of an insurance policy to try to make it easier to manage the goods going back and forth between the island of Britain and Northern Ireland, because of the slightly difficult relationship, precarious if you like, between the customs union on one side and the single market on the other.
Okay, now should Britain fail to seal a deal at the end of the year, what will the economic and social outcome be for the UK? Could we see shortages of food, huge tailbacks at ports, and lack of medical supplies from Europe? Could this lead to problems within the UK?
Absolutely. I think the image has always been one of a real division, if you like, in terms of how Britain is going to be able to manage its ports in particular. Should there be no deal, what Britain is going to have to fall back on is effectively WTO, World Trade Organization criteria. And that means relationships with the European Union on absolutely everything with regards to trade, but with no special deal effectively. So we are going to see tariffs added back on. We are going to see charges and prices and taxes added back on, from everything to motor cars to beef to milk, etc. This is coming against the backdrop of COVID, which we're already seeing economic impacts, pushing prices up, unavailability, I think, of key goods. So it seems to me something of a perfect storm. You mentioned the impact of potential tailbacks at ports. That comes about because Britain is going to have to negotiate some sort of customs arrangement, because of course all the goods coming into Britain have to be checked, and all the goods coming out of Britain have to be checked as well. Because if you have no special deal with the European Union, that's what you require. Businesses, I think, are terrified.
And finally, the issue surrounding the north of Ireland having a border with the Republic of Ireland appears to breach the rules of the Good Friday Agreement. And a border down the middle of the Irish Sea will essentially hand the north of Ireland back to the Republic. Will this issue be the main sticking point when it comes to the UK-EU relations?
Ireland is going to remain a tricky and challenging topic for years to come. It was very interesting that the United States stepped into the fray in the last couple of days, with key congressmen and senators making it very clear to Dominic Raab, the British Foreign Secretary, when he visited Washington last week, that they would absolutely not tolerate any breach or any diminishment of the Good Friday Agreement. So if Britain thinks that it's going to be able to tinker with this and not draw world attention, it's seriously underestimated that.
Okay, many thanks there to Professor Amelia Hatfield from the CBE at the University of Surrey. It was great to hear your thoughts on this ever-evolving saga.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, it's time to take a quick break here on Economic Divide, but don't go anywhere as we have plenty more coming up. We're going to be joined by our researcher and analyst Atafe Padidar as she runs through some of the stories hitting the waves on social media. Also, a deeper look at what is happening on the island of Ireland and to ascertain whether Brexit will start the collapse of the United Kingdom, maybe. Also look at the view of the EU in more detail and examine how the EU has tackled the Brexit dilemma. We will also take a look at other economic and financial headlines around the world in our Info News section. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this short message. Hello, welcome back to Economic Divide with me, Kaveh. Time now to take a closer look at other economic news from around the world. First, our story recently on Nairobi National Parks appears to have shaken the government of Kenya. It has now stopped all plans to destroy the park. According to our guests, the park is now being protected with no further development plans. And finally, 40 groups in the U.S. are demanding Congress probe gross misuse of $1 billion in COVID-19 funding by the Pentagon. They said that, quote, it's unconscionable that the department would prioritize defense contractor wish lists over the health and safety of the American people. The controversy surrounds how $1 billion of pandemic-related aid was for military contractors, which was used for body armor and jet engines. Now, let's take a deeper look at how Brexit is playing a part in the Irish economic, social, and political situation.
For many Brexiteers, the notion of the divorce bill of £39 billion was thought to be the main sticking point when it came to delays and failures in the trade deal. However, few would have thought that the north of Ireland would be back on the table. With Boris Johnson failing to come to any notion of an agreement with the EU on a trade deal, the north of Ireland has been put on standby as the British consider breaking international law by tearing up the withdrawal agreement and potentially seeing a can of worms open on the island of Ireland.
Well, of course, what we have seen is Boris Johnson take not just a leaf, but a full chapter out of Donald Trump's rule book. Last week, it introduced, or announced it was introducing, into the House of Commons, the Internal Market Bill. And the Internal Market Bill rewrites the withdrawal agreement, which is an international treaty. And they brazenly announced in the House of Commons that they were going to break an international treaty.
The consequences of the decision by the UK are far wider and deeper than just a change of the rules, with the scope of the fallout proving to be enormous.
Now, this has all sorts of consequences across the world, because, of course, it indicates that regardless of what agreement you come to with the British government, they reserve the right to unilaterally break that agreement. It has consequences for them with the future trading agreement with the United States, because, of course, the United States was deeply involved in resolving our conflict here and in the signing of the Good Friday Agreement, which brought us peace and moves towards reconciliation.
With the British unable to place a hard border on the island of Ireland due to the Good Friday Agreement, the risk of losing its control of the north of Ireland should it place a pseudo-border down the Irish Sea, it seems that both ways the British are on a lose-lose route, and a united Ireland could soon become a reality.
And I have explained to your viewers the possible consequences of this in the north if the British government imposes a hard border again, because a hard border, of course, means customs posts being set up, then policemen to protect them, and then soldiers to protect the policemen. And that would be a return of the military presence in the north of Ireland. And that would be a recipe for disaster.
Joining me in the studio today is Atafe Padidar, a regular journalist and researcher. Atafe, thanks for coming and joining us today. What do you have for our never-ending saga of Brexit in terms of social media posts?
Well, there were a lot of reactions to the recent meeting between Dominic Raab and Mike Pompeo. A lot of Britons think that this meeting is not going to have a good outcome for people in the UK, and This is just another another play in political game. If we look at the tweet, Akin says that this is not a wise diplomacy, and he thinks that whatever Pompeo is going to say or offers to the UK is going to be nothing but lies. If we move to the next tweet, we see people think that none of these guys, nor Pompeo or Rob, are going to be trusted. They're saying that these politicians are not going to help Britons, and the US is just going after its own interest in the United Kingdom.
Okay, very well. Thank you very much for that. We appreciate it. It's good to see you. That's Atifa there with her tweets and social media posts. Okay, in our final report today, we're going to take a look at the EU, how it's viewing the whole Brexit issue, and whether the notion of stronger together is stronger than ever in the EU. So stay right where you are.
Britain clearly think they're running along the correct path when it comes to everything to do with Brexit, and clearly do not care who they upset in the process. The EU have shown a firm stance, as demonstrated by the chief negotiator, Michel Barnier, when he warned that the EU would not bend a millimetre when it comes to putting EU values at risk to please the British. But what then do the Europeans think of the British when it comes to withdrawing from the European Union, in particular when it comes to looking at the mess caused by the whole affair?
Well, I mean, everybody has witnessed the so-called mess of Brexit. So the greatest fear of Europeans, the slippery slope, or at least of European leaders, has not happened. In fact, it's kind of like a vaccination, Brexit, for leaders. They're happy with that. On the other hand, they do mind the fact that Brexit could hurt their electorate, their fishermen, their farmers, their industries, and they've been trying to minimize, the cost of Brexit for the continent.
For many in Europe, in particular the pro-EU press, the notion of Brexit makes Britain look like the laughingstock. But the current world we live in clearly shows that we have much bigger issues to worry about.
So we are having this interview with you in the Middle East, and I think this really speaks to what's at stake here, which is, for me, the fact that with Brexit and these negotiations, we see the tyranny of small differences. Here are two sides who share so many values and interests and strategic interests in today's world, who are seeing a neighborhood of the EU and of Europe and the Mediterranean and the Middle East, very shaken by so many things, where we see humanity, drown and all of that. And then we are discussing really small differences, is your environmental, they might be important for some people, but I do believe that the EU countries and the UK are pretty much in the same place in these standards. They should be working together in the future, respecting each other's autonomy, yes, absolutely. And this is a learning process. The negotiations have been a learning process.
The UK for centuries used the divide and rule policy to conquer the world. Yet it seems that this policy is coming back to bite them as they attempt to part ways with the EU and seek to become a single entity across the world order. However, will this decision ultimately cause the division of the UK, with the north of Ireland and Scotland potentially seeking to stay with the EU? Britain was once known for its cunning diplomacy, but it seems that the memories of the past have long faded when it comes to negotiating with the more organized and clearly skilled EU diplomats who have refused to bow to UK pressure and have shown that a strong Europe relies on widening and deepening rather than cracks that will tear it apart. The future of Britain looks to be in turmoil as both the financial impact of Brexit and the COVID-19 virus takes its toll on the island. With signs of a light at the end of the tunnel, Britain may have to scramble to secure deals with the US and beyond. But in desperate times, will they seek the deal that they desire elsewhere? Or is Britain doomed to be a one-sided, obey-all trading partner? Don't forget, we'd like to hear your thoughts on Brexit or any other topic. So log on to our Twitter page using the marker @ED_program and get in touch with us. We promise to get back to everyone who writes in. You can watch this episode and any previous episode of ED again by logging on to our website and clicking on shows where you will find Economic Divide. So make sure you check us out. That's all the time we have for today's show up in Kavatahwai. On behalf of the whole team here on Economic Divide, thanks for watching, stay safe, and we'll see you again next time.